Hey guys, welcome to the Year 12 Maths Standard 2 2024 HSC. Today I'm going to be going through the 15 multiple choice questions, and then in another video I will do the short answer questions as well. So for question 1, it says if x is equal to negative 2.531, what is the value of x squared? So we simply, whenever we square a number, you know it's got to be positive, so it's not going to be a or b. So we can just literally type in 2.531 squared with a positive or negative in front of it, because when you square either, you've got to get a positive. And if you do that, you're going to get 6.41 to 2 decimal places. So that's going to be D. That's going to be your correct answer. Question 2, consider the function shown. Which of the following could be the equation of this function? Okay, well, we know it's got to be a negative gradient because it's going down towards the left, so we can rule out A and B. And then we know its y-intercept must be a positive value since it's above the x-axis. So that means it would have to be 3, not negative 3. So C would have to be our answer there. Question 3, shoppers are invited to complete an online survey. What type of sampling is this? This is going to be an example of a self-selecting survey, and the reason is because people are invited to and they choose to do the survey. So they're selecting themselves to do it. It's none of the other surveys. It's not random, it's not stratified, and it's not systematic. It has to be self-selected. They volunteer themselves. Question 4. The map shows regions within a country. A network diagram is to be drawn to represent this map. Vertices will be used to indicate each region, and edges will be used to represent borders shared between two regions. How many edges will there be in the network diagram? So what we're going to do is draw the network diagram and then work out how many edges there are. So basically from forest, that shares its border with mountains and swamps. So from forest, I can either go to mountains or swamp. Now, from mountains, I've got a few options. I can either go to woods, desert, swamp, or forest. The only one I can't go to is coast because coast doesn't share its border with mountains. So from mountains, I can go to forest. I've already drawn that line. But from mountains, I can also go to swamp. And then from mountains, I can go to desert. And then from mountains, I can go to woods. Now let's look at swamp. From swamp, I can only go to two places, forest or mountains, as that's the only two shared regions around its edge, and those lines are already drawn. So now we've done mountains, forest, and swamp. Now we're just going to do woods, desert, and coast. So if we look at woods next, I can either go to mountains or desert, nothing else. So woods to mountains is already drawn, so I've just got to do woods to desert. Now from desert, I've got three options. I can go to woods, mountains, or coast. So two of them are already drawn. Coast is the last one that hasn't been drawn. And then if we look at coast, I've only got one option, which is to desert. That line's already drawn. So then if we count the amount of edges we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've got 7 edges, so therefore B would be our answer. Okay, question 5. Peers' marks in a Year 10 assessment are shown. The scores for each subject were normally distributed, so that means we've got the bell curve happening. And which subject did Peer perform best in comparison with the rest of Year 10? So she got 78, 80, 77, and 85 in those 4 subjects. The mean was lower for all of those subjects, so she was above the mean for all of them. But what we want to know is how many standard deviations she was above the mean. So for English, she would have been 2 standard deviations above the mean, because if you take 6 times by 2, you get 12, and then you add on that to the mean. 12 plus 66 is 78. For maths, she was less than 1 standard deviation above the mean, because if you add 1 standard deviation to the mean, you're going to get 81, and she didn't even quite get 81. So she's still above the mean, but not even 1 standard deviation. So far, English is the best. For science, the mean was, what was the mean? 70. The standard deviation was 15. So in order to beat English, she needs to be 2 standard deviations minimum above the mean. And that's simply not the case, because if you take 15 times by 2, that's 30. If you add on 30 to a 70, that would mean she'd have to get 100. So that's definitely not it. And then the last one for history, she's also not 2 standard deviations above the mean, because if you take 9, double it, you get 18. If you add on 18 to 72, you're going to get 90, and she got 85, which is less than 90. So therefore, A will have to be our answer. in English, she is the 2 whole standard deviations above the mean, whereas she's not 2 standard deviations above the mean for any other subject. She's less than 2 standard deviations above the mean. Okay. 6. Consider the diagram shown, which of the following is the correct expression for the length of x. So the angle they've given us is this 40. So that means that's going to be opposite, that's going to be adjacent, that's going to be hypotenuse. So we're going to be looking at a cos relationship. So cos 40 is equal to adjacent, which is called x, over hypotenuse, which is 20. So if you multiply both sides by 20, x is going to be equal to 20 cos 40. So that means A will be your answer for question 6. Question 7, 3 years ago, the price of a uniform was $180. Due to inflation, the price increased annually by 2.5%. What is the price of the uniform now? So it's 3 years ago. So it's basically got to be, we've got to use the compound formula. So we've got 180, and then we've got to times it by 1 plus our rate, which is 0.025. And then this happens over 3 years, so we're going to raise that to the third power, and that's going to give us our current amount. And if I type that into our calculator, I'm going to get, sorry, just bear with me, that's going to give me $193.84. So that would mean D is your answer. 8. A bill for servicing a car is made up of $240 for parts, which includes 10% GST, and then $100 for labor, excluding GST. The mechanic needs to add 10% GST onto the labor charge. How much GST does the customer pay in total? So he's got $100 for labor, that's excluding GST. Once you add the GST for the labor, that's going to be another $10 because 10% of 100 is $10. So he's got to pay $10 in GST for the labor, and then we need to add that to the GST for the parts. But the 242, we don't find 10% and add it on because it already includes 10%. So 242 is equal to 110%. Anytime you see including 10%, take that dollar figure and make it equal to 110. Then we can simply use the unitary method. So we can find what 1% is equal to by dividing this by 110. And then we want to find what 10% is, what the GST is. So we've got to take our 242 over 110, and then we just can times it by 10. Okay, so 242 over 110 multiplied by 10 is $22. So $22 is the GST she paid for parts. And then we need to add that to the GST she's got to pay for labor. So that's going to give us a total of $32. So that means C would be your answer for 8. 9, the time taken to paint a school varies inversely. Whenever you see that, you do y is equal to k divided by x. If it's direct, then it's y is equal to kx. It varies inversely with the number of painters completing the task. If it takes 6 painters a total of 20 days to paint a school, how many days would it take 15 painters to paint the same school? So this is basically to find k, and then we want to find one of the unknowns with our k now, and with subbing in 15. So the time taken varies inversely. So instead of y and x, I'm going to write the time taken, t, varies inversely with the number of painters. I'll just write n. It takes 6 painters 20 days, so that's going to be 20. It's going to be k over 6. K is going to be simply 6 times 20, which is 120. How many days would it take? So we want time, so we want t is equal to 120 over n is our formula. And we want to find t, how many days, when n is 15. So t is going to be 120 divided by 15. If we type that in our calculator, we're going to get 8. So it's going to take 8 days. So for question 9, B is your answer. Question 10, consider the formula. S is equal to WT plus P on 2. Which of the following correctly shows P as the subject of the formula? So the first thing we need to do is get rid of the constant, which is WT. So we're going to minus WT from both sides. So we're going to get S minus WT is equal to P over 2. Then we're just going to multiply both sides by 2. So I'm going to get 2 bracket S minus WT is equal to P. And out of our options here, they're all expanded. So I'm going to expand it too. So I'm going to get 2S minus 2WT is equal to P. So which of those options is it? 2S minus 2WT. That will have to be option D. So for 10, D is your answer. Question 11. A train left Richmond at 6:42 a.m. and arrived at Central Station at 8:04 a.m. The distance travelled by the train from Richmond to Central was 61 kilometres. What is the average speed correct to the nearest kilometre per hour? So if we refer to our distance, speed, time triangle, we want speed. So speed is equal to distance divided by time. So speed is equal to our distance, which is 61, divided by our time. And we want our time to be in hours because we want kilometers per hour. So this is kilometers. And then whatever we divide it by, we want to be in hours. So then our final answer will be in kilometers per hours. So it left at 6:42 and arrived at Central at 8:04 a.m. So that's going to be 1 hour and 18 minutes. We'll get you to 8 a.m. Add another 4 minutes. So that's going to be 1 hour and 22 minutes. So that's going to be 1 point something hours. So 22 minutes, if I do 22 over 60, that's equal to 0.3667 hours. So we've got to add that onto 1. So it's got to be 1.367 hours. And to keep that in exact form, that's just the same as 1 plus 22 over 60, that many hours. All right, so I'm going to divide by 1 plus 22 over 60. That's going to be how many hours? And if I type that in my calculator, I'm going to get, just bear with me 1 second, an average speed of, click SD, we're going to get 44.63. And it says the nearest kilometer an hour, so that's going to be 45 kilometers an hour. So that means B would be your correct answer. Question 12. A survey of 370 people was conducted to investigate the association between watching anime and the age of a person. The two-way table shows the results. Approximately what percentage of over 30-year-olds watch anime? So what percentage of over 30-year-olds? So that means we're going to limit our denominator to the total amount, but not to total. It's just specifically of the 30-year-olds, of the over 30-year-olds. And there's 157 over 30-year-olds. That's going to go on the bottom. And then of this 157, how many of them watch anime? Well, 34 of them do. So that's going to go in the numerator. And of course, we want it as a percentage. So we're going to times by 100. And when we do that, we're going to get a percentage of approximately 22%. So that would mean C is your answer for 12. 13, Jose takes out a loan of $9,000. Simple interest, so I equals PRN, is charged on the loan. The loan and interest charge will be repaid by making monthly repayments of $300 over 4 years. What simple interest rate per annum to the nearest percent is charged on the loan? So the amount he's going to make in repayments is 300 times by 12. That's for 1 year. And then over the 4 years, we're going to multiply it by 4. So that's going to give us a total of $14,400 worth in repayments. But the principal is only $9,000. So the amount of interest he pays is his total repayments minus the principal. And that's going to give us a total interest amount paid of $5,400. So now we can sub that in for I when we use I equals PRN. So 5,400 is going to be equal to his principal amount times by the rate we're trying to solve for. And we want the rate to be in per annum. So we times by the number n, which is the number of years. So 4. So therefore R is going to be equal to 5,400 divided by the product of these two. So 9,000 times by 4. Okay. So R is going to be equal to 5,400 over 9,000 times by 4. It's going to be equal to 0.15, which is 15%. So A would be our answer. Question 14. Year 11 is making pizzas to raise money for a charity. The cost and revenue are there, where X is the pizzas sold by the equation. Enough pizzas are sold so that profit is made. By how much does the profit increase for each additional pizza sold? So basically, if I draw up a cost and revenue diagram, the revenue is going to be 8x, so it's going to be pretty steep like that. And then the cost is going to have a y-intercept of 6, and it's not going to be as steep. It's going to be a bit flatter, but still have a positive sort of slope. So this could represent cost, and that could be represent revenue. That's going to be 6. So we know enough enough pizzas are sold so that profit is made. So at least this many pizzas are sold, whatever that is. So I'll just write XP. And then it wants to know for each additional pizza sold, how much profit is made. So first of all, we want to find the intersection between the two graphs, which can be found by letting these equations equal one another. Right, and if we minus 2.5x from both sides, we're going to get 6 is equal to 5.5x. If we divide both sides by 5.5, we're going to get x is equal to 6 divided by 5.5, which is 1.09 ... whatever, approximately that. So that's what p is equal to. And then so that's how many pizzas need to be sold. And then we want to know the profit. So the profit is going to be equal to your revenue minus your costs. So we're going to have our revenue. Profit is equal to our revenue, which is R, minus our cost. So that's going to be equal to 8x minus c, so minus 2.5x minus 6. And we know profit is made. We want to find p, so by how much profit. But then what do we need to sub in for x? Well, we need to add 1 to this because we're selling one more pizza. So we need to sub in 2.09. So profit is going to be equal to 8 times 2.09 minus 2.5 times 2.09 minus 6. And if I type that in my calculator, I am going to get times 2.09 plus minus 6. I'm going to get $5.49.495 dollars. So that's going to be equal to B, $5.50. Okay, so question 15, it says some data are used to create a box plot shown. A histogram is created for the same set of data, which the following histogram is not possible with the given box plot. Well, the key takeaway is that from the end whisker to Q1 is shorter than it is from Q1 to Q2, and shorter from Q2 to Q3. However, the same as Q3 to the endpoint. So these, let me get the highlighter. So these distances are the same, and then these distances are the same. But the two green ones are both shorter than the two yellow ones. But what's key is that 25% of data is in each of these 4 segments. So since 25% of the scores is in the green segments as well as the yellow segments, but the green segments are smaller than the yellow segments, so that means we must have higher density. So we want to be getting a histogram that looks something sort of like this. We want high density towards the ends because 25% of the scores is in such a low region. There might only be a few scores here. However, then 25% of the scores are over a much wider region. So that must mean it must be sort of lower here. Well, that wasn't really much lower. And then it comes up and it like peaks again. It must be a lot higher on the outside. Okay, so the only one here which doesn't really have high density on the outside is D. So that's why D is probably not possible. You can immediately rule that out. And then we've got low density in the middle, whereas D's got sort of high density in the middle with D's. Whereas the others, we've got high density on the outside. This is not high, but it's still much higher than what D is, and it's more uniform. So yeah, D would have to be the incorrect one just by looking at them. You could assign scores to the gray columns and then work it out that way, but that would be a lot more time consuming. Like I said again, we've got 25% of the scores just in such a small little region. So that means there must be high density at those lower ends. And option D clearly has low density at those lower ends. So that one immediately cannot be it. It's not possible. All right, thank you.